I have my own local private practice. My specific practice area is in adult outpatient mental health, and I've been practicing since 2001. I would like to begin by acknowledging that no one is an expert on anything right now, as we're all in uncharted territory. My hope for this webinar is to highlight some psychology principles and skills that we apply in other conditions, and hope that some of this is helpful to you as you navigate these uncharted waters while providing care to your loved ones and the community. You are all valued members of the front line, and regardless of your role in healthcare, you are now, more than ever, amongst the most valuable in our community. I would like to thank Beverly Cater, Regional Professional Practice Consultant for Psychology, and Molly Butler, the Regional Director for Professional Practice, for the opportunity to present this information today. Let's begin by respectfully acknowledging the province of Newfoundland and Labrador, of which the city of St. John's is the capital city, as the ancestral homelands of the Beothuk. Today, these lands are home to a diverse population of Indigenous and other peoples. We would also like to acknowledge with respect the diverse histories and cultures of the Mi'kmaq, Innu, Inuit, and Nunatu-Kavut Inuit, Southern Inuit of this province. So we're going to cover a lot of topics over the next hour, and the wonderful thing about this webinar being recorded is you can go back and review any part of it that you find especially helpful or interesting. We're going to start with self-compassion, which is an important overlay for the entire webinar and life itself. I'm also going to give you some education around our anxiety response system and some of why we're all feeling so stressed right now. The other grounding for this workshop is in the balance between acceptance and change. And we'll learn how to ground ourselves, how to drop anchor and return to the present moment when we feel like we're getting swept away. We'll also hopefully have a better understanding of what our needs are and how we can meet them, some specific coping strategies, and some specific resources. You may want to take screenshots or photos throughout the workshop as I present information that's interesting to you. And again, you can certainly go back and rewatch it if it's helpful. Self-compassion is a learnable skill, and it's important to building resilience, strength, and well-being. It's going to be an essential tool for all of us to use as we navigate over the coming weeks. And many of you may have already noticed that things are shifting moment by moment at work, at home, and in the world around us. As such, in order to skillfully navigate this constant change and stress, we need to engage in self-compassion. It involves the following three components. The first is self-kindness. We need to be kind to ourselves as we would to a dear friend or our child. Be patient and understanding, and know we are deserving of the care and concern we give readily to others. Think about what you would or what you have been saying to your children. When they've expressed their thoughts and emotions about what's been happening, how have you engaged with them? Can you turn some of that kindness toward yourself? The second principle is our common humanity. Give yourself permission to be human, including knowing you will make missteps. You will need to shift as we go, and above all, you're a human. None of us know how to navigate this. We're all going to have to learn by experimenting, and some of our experiments will succeed, and some will be epic fails. We're going to have some wins when we feel like we've adapted well to the events that unfolded that day, and we're also going to have some rough days, some breakdown moments, and we're going to behave in ways that don't reflect our values or our best selves. We are all doing the best we can. Let's give ourselves some space and some permission to be human. The third principle is mindfulness. Be mindful, present in each moment, and self-validating of emotions, thoughts, and sensations as they arise within you. Mindfulness is a skill that many talk about nowadays, and I'd like to briefly explain it now. I'll also provide resources for further development of mindfulness practice later in the webinar. Mindfulness is a skill for noticing. It's used to notice aspects of our current, this moment experience, whether internal or external focus. We can notice internal aspects, such as our thoughts, our bodily sensations, our emotions. We can super focus on one aspect of the experience. Like, try to focus right now on the way your shoe feels on your left big toe. We can also notice external experiences, such as a sound. Like when listening to music, we can focus on one instrument, or when eating a meal, we can focus on the texture or on the different flavors. There are limitless ways to use mindfulness, such as mindful cooking, walking, coloring, dog petting, breathing, thinking, and so on. Mindfulness challenges are excellent ways to build this skill, and Bridge the Gap, our province's e-mental health resource, has a free 30-day mindfulness challenge I would recommend. I would like to begin with a brief self-compassion mindfulness practice. So we're going to actually engage in two different practices, and the first one is something that you can create, like a mantra that you can use when you're working or trying to get your technology to work for you, if you're working from home, or if you're traveling to work, and you're having that anxiety at the start of a shift, especially not knowing what you're going to face, or traveling home after work, knowing that you need to go through some steps before you can relax. Or even when you're putting your kids to bed or trying to get them to help around the house or do their homework, arguing with your partner, or any other time you feel like you need a jolt of self-compassion to help you through the moment. When you're feeling stressed or overwhelmed, say some soothing words of support to yourself. Something like, I know you're stressed and you're doing the best you can right now. This is overwhelming, so it's natural to feel stressed, and I'm here for you. Try it now. Touch is also very powerful, and research has shown that it releases oxytocin, which is an important hormone for attachment and social bonding. While we're in this pandemic, we're being discouraged from touch with others as per social distancing protocols. For those of us who are huggers and value touch, this can be a significant loss during the time we most need touch. So try some kind self-touch. So during that mantra, I had my hand on my chest over my heart. You can also try softly rubbing your arms, giving yourself a big hug because we don't need to socially distance from ourselves, or gently massage whatever parts of your body feel tense. Touch has huge health benefits, including lowering cortisol levels, thus reducing anxiety and stress. It's also been shown to alleviate depression, improve immune function, reduce pain, enhance attentiveness, decrease blood pressure, and calm the heart rate. So a lot of bang for your buck there. Here's a sweet image of someone giving themselves a hug. So stress and stress management. I love this image. At our core, we are animals who possess an anxiety response system, which is also known as the sympathetic nervous system, or more commonly known as the stress response. While this response can feel uncomfortable and distressing in our minds and bodies, it is actually an amazing system designed to keep us safe when we're faced with what our system perceives as a threat. Without our conscious awareness, our system does a lot of things instantaneously and simultaneously to maintain our safety. There are reasons for each of the responses, and we break this down into 4 different systems to understand and manage better what's happening inside. The first system that we look at is what's called here somatic symptoms, and what we also call the physical or body sensations. This is what most people think about when we think about stress, and it's what happens inside our body, like our increased heart rate or the butterflies in our stomach, which certainly I was feeling at the very beginning and are starting to fade now as I'm getting into this webinar. Another example is sweating, which actually serves a really interesting purpose where it cools our system, which I think a lot of us know about, and it also makes us slippery. So if predators are trying to grasp us, they're not able to get a good grab. And so all of the different somatic symptoms that we experience have an important purpose for survival. And it can be really interesting to Google some of the different things you're experiencing and understand the intention originally for that experience. Another system that's not actually on this chart is our emotions or feelings. So the emotions of fear or dread are really typical when the stress response system is activated. We can think about emotions as E-motion because emotions are rapid response systems that mobilize us quickly without needing thought toward action. We also may notice other emotions, such as sadness related to the many losses we're experiencing, and anger, as this situation is unfair. We also have cognitive symptoms or thoughts or things that our mind does. Most of us are experiencing worry right now. We also may be struggling to organize plans, make decisions, or concentrate. This is typical when we're under stress, and while it may feel like really inconvenient timing when we need to organize so many practical changes and resources, it's a natural aspect of the stress response. And our last system is the behavioral system, or our actions. It's one that we're most often aware of because many behaviors are external and visible. Behaviors are typically related to moving away from threat through different forms of avoidance. So why is the coronavirus so stressful? And you can see here that it kind of hits on all of those different areas that we talked about. So, you know, some of them are emotions like despair, fear, or loneliness, or even hopelessness. Some of them are more situational, like decreased job security, and some of them are more around our mindset, like the switch from living to survival. You'll also notice here that increased health anxiety is one of the consequences of the coronavirus. I'll also say that many people who have any pre-existing mental health conditions are finding right now a particularly challenging time, whether it's OCD or PTSD or depression or anxiety, as a lot of the different things that we recommend typically to people to manage those illnesses are just really not even possible or advisable right now. And the threat response system being triggered is really challenging for people who already have challenges with that, like anxiety disorders or trauma disorders. So it's really important that if you do have any pre-existing mental health conditions, that you're very aware of the risks around the current situation for mental health. And, you know, even if you don't, just be aware that this could certainly impact our mental health. So that's our stress response system. And many of you have probably noticed, and you will now, that there's another response listed on this slide. It's termed the parasympathetic nervous system, or the relaxation response. What I tell my clients is that while the stress response is built in and we don't even have to do anything to strengthen it, it just like comes to us when we're born and naturally works without any training. The relaxation response is built in, and we do have to work to strengthen it. So I think of it kind of more like the IKEA response system, where we have to build it, and through building it is where we're going to be able to get the most effect and use from it. So the next few slides, we're going to focus on strengthening our relaxation response, which will yield the benefits we need to ride out this stressful time in our human story. Diaphragmatic or deep belly breathing is one of the fastest and most effective ways of activating the relaxation response. We use several techniques to teach people diaphragmatic breathing, and I would recommend searching videos on YouTube. If you're a singer, you'll already be familiar with this, as will those of you who also use breath work in their hobbies, like people who do yoga, theater, or running. One technique we use to teach breathing is called the two-hand technique. So let's try it now. Place one hand on your chest and the other on your stomach. Purse your lips together and breathing in through your lips or your nose, it doesn't matter which, try to pull the breath down to your belly. Breathe in for about 5 seconds and then out again for about 5 seconds. Do this a few times, filling your lungs completely and then letting the air flow out naturally until your lungs are emptied. Don't hold your breath or tense your body while you do this exercise. Now notice which hand is rising. And if it's your stomach hand, this is what we're going for. If your chest hand is rising, don't despair. This is a skill, and like all skills, it requires practice. Practice during times you're already relaxed until you can feel the movement needed, and only practice a few breaths at a time to avoid overbreathing. And as mentioned, if the two-hand technique is not helpful, search others online as there are limitless breath exercises. There are also different ways you can engage the relaxation response, such as progressive muscle relaxation. And I won't take you through that right now, but I would highly recommend researching relaxation strategies and starting to practice them regularly so that you can integrate them during the more stressful times and activate that parasympathetic response. One of the more concerning aspects of this pandemic is the uncertainty surrounding it. As humans, we have minds that love to problem solve. In fact, that's one of the main functions of our mind. But what is one to do when we're faced with so many new problems and ones we collectively have never faced and don't have ready solutions for? Well, that's what's leading to that feedback loop that we're all likely experiencing. Worry, leading to trying to get more information, leading to worry, leading to trying to plan and organize, leading to, yep, more worry. We don't tend to do well with uncertainty. It feels really threatening to us. So how can we skillfully navigate all of this uncertainty while respecting that our minds and our bodies are responding exactly as nature intended? And it is so darned uncomfortable. These are just some ideas. We are going to go through some of them. And perhaps now is a good time to introduce you to the second important focus of today's webinar. The first being self-compassion. Remember that self-kindness we discussed being essential for this time. The second essential focus is understanding the dialectic of acceptance and change. Now, I imagine many people's minds are seeing acceptance. How can she even suggest I accept anything about this? This is unacceptable. And my mind says that too. Acceptance at its core is acknowledging the moment as it is presenting itself, not liking or agreeing with it, or saying we want it to be there, or even the silver lining stuff people keep talking about. Acceptance is also not passive resignation that, oh well, it is what it is. While those words may convey acceptance, the tone is resignation. Acceptance is saying, I see you. I acknowledge you are there and that this is really happening. And here's where the paradox comes in. Weirdly, the more we accept, the more we are in a position to change. So this is the core of the dialectic. Two things that seem like they cannot both be simultaneously true actually are. Another example of this is, I am doing the best I can do, and I need to do better. Note the use of the word and instead of but. This allows us to hold both statements as true simultaneously, which opens things up quite a bit. Acceptance and change. We have an expression we use regularly as psychologists. Distress in life is inevitable. Suffering is optional. Let's sit with that for a moment. Distress is inevitable. We all have distress regularly, even outside of this current pandemic. And yet we all have a choice when it comes to suffering. And suffering is caused by the struggle to accept. Whether it's a struggle to accept reality, emotions that are arising, thoughts in our mind. So if we can find ways to meet the moment as it is, rather than refusing that it is, we will be able to change and adapt as is needed, even while remaining steadfast that we do not like most of what is happening right now. One of the distressing experiences we need to accept or make room for is anxiety. As mentioned, this is a natural response to an actual threat. So how do we do that? Let's start by dropping an anchor. We've all witnessed storms at sea, whether in person or from the shore, or on a TV show like The Deadliest Catch. Sometimes seafarers are prepared for the storms, and so they can retreat to a port for safety. Sometimes they are not, as weather, like life, can be unpredictable. So what is one to do when at sea and a storm catches them off guard? Will they drop the anchor to moor them to a spot until they can safely navigate once again? This metaphor is helpful when we're overwhelmed by distressing thoughts, emotions, sensations, or other experiences that feel very stormy. The first step is to put your feet firmly on the ground. Do it with me now. You can stand or sit. Notice your feet on the floor. Notice your feet pushing on the floor and the floor pushing back up on your feet. Notice the way your socks feel on your feet and the way your feet feel in your shoes, or the way your clothes feel on your arms or your legs. Now, notice 3 things you can see in your immediate environment. Notice 3 things you can hear. What is something you can feel, like the air on your face or your ring on your finger? This strategy of focusing our mind on our immediate internal and external experiences, remember the mindfulness tool we talked about before when discussing self-compassion, is a powerful tool for returning to the present moment when we get swept up in a storm of worry or panic or any overwhelming distress during this highly stressful time. So now that we've dropped anchor and our minds are functioning a bit better, let's discuss how much humans dislike feeling out of control, just like how much we dislike uncertainty. Most of us regulate much of our life by exerting control. And while many of us have had that illusion of control shattered by illness, injury, loss, and the natural distress of life, we still keep returning to this perception that we have control over more than we do. It's one of the forms of denial we all use to survive, to quote Prince, this thing called life. But now that illusion of control is being shattered regularly for all of us, and we feel very overwhelmed by loss. So what can we do about it? Part of that dialectic of acceptance and change comes back to that serenity prayer many of us are familiar with. I'll recite it now just to jog your memory. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. So what can we not change and need to accept about this pandemic? This is a helpful graphic that's going around social media. When we notice ourselves focus on the outside items, which we naturally will, it's our task to notice it, drop anchor, and do something on the inner circle to move forward. So this is perhaps a good time to address base level needs and the idea of values. This is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The way we use this tool is similar to building a pyramid. We need to have a strong base before we can build up the levels. Many of us, prior to coronavirus, were likely up in the higher parts of the pyramid, such as love, belonging, esteem, and maybe even self-actualization. But as we now face this scenario where our safety is threatened, the higher levels of the pyramid are not as relevant as the base of our pyramid is now threatened. Further, if you catch the virus and it impacts your food intake, breathing, or other aspects of homeostasis, such as body temperature, even our security of employment or family become less important. This can be a helpful way of understanding why many of us are struggling with productivity or creativity or problem solving right now, as these are higher levels of the pyramid. Again, we need to give ourselves permission to be human. So knowing this, it's essential at this time that we prioritize meeting our base level needs, which are physiological in nature, and then gradually move up the pyramid to safety and so on and so on. We may need to keep dropping down to the base needs as circumstances shift, hence the need for some flexibility and patience with ourselves and with others during this time. And self-compassion. And yes, that was a shameless plug. So how do we ensure that we're meeting these base level needs which benefit us by reducing our emotional vulnerability, which is essential when we're facing so much distress, that we start from the strongest emotional base we can? Sleep. And I'll admit I threw this slide in as a shout out to the resident I'm working with now who loves The Office. So we all know how important sleep is, and yet it escapes us regularly. How many of us can relate to this meme? See, what happens for a lot of us is we spend our day avoiding anxiety by staying busy, staying distracted, and generally avoiding our mind's constant chattering about the many threats it's perceiving. Now, when there is an actual threat, as there is with the virus, if it has your attention, it'll be screaming at you, like when the world around us is quiet and we're trying to fall asleep. So how do we maintain what we refer to as sleep hygiene during this stressful time? I won't be able to focus exclusively on sleep hygiene as it is a topic in itself, but you can Google it, and for now I'll share one tip. Many people focus on bedtimes when they're setting a sleep schedule, but we focus on wake times when we're trying to treat sleep difficulties. Set a reasonable wake time, and regardless of when you fall asleep, even if it was only an hour prior to your alarm, don't deviate from your wake time. You will feel tired during the day. We are trying to create a sleep drive. It may take some time for sleep to get set, but this is a starting point. Now, it's also important to settle your mind and your body, and there are many tips online for this. And it's also important how you set up your room, the temperature of the space, and many other important tips. Psychologists use a treatment called CBTI, and if you're interested in this, you can follow up with psychology to inquire. We also know that nutrition and diet matter a lot to our physical and emotional vulnerability. There was a webinar recently at Eastern Health entitled Examining the Relationship Between Nutrition and Mental Health. It contained excellent information, and it was done in joint collaboration by a predoctoral resident in psychology and a dietetic intern. I recommend it highly. If you're not able to watch it, however, I would suggest that eating a balanced and regular meal plan, including all food groups, is ideal. And nutrition has an impact on energy, mood, immunity, cognitive function, hormones, and everything down to the cellular level. I'm no dietitian, so I will not speak more about this, but I would recommend you speak with one or do some independent research through reputable sources if you are interested in how diet can help you through this time. I know it's challenging during the best of times to fit 30 minutes of movement into our daily lives. That said, exercise is one of the most beneficial time investments you can make, especially now. If you're not already, figure out a way to incorporate at least 30 minutes of movement into your day. There are lots of online resources now offering free options, including gyms that have provided online classes like the YMCA, online yoga instructors, some of them are groups, some individual, workout programs you can do with what you have in your home. And as of now, it's safe to walk outside, which will give you extra benefits of sunshine, exposure to nature, and fresh air. Just maintain the appropriate distance from other walkers. If you're not already active, build your activity levels gradually and safely, and you can consult with a physiotherapist if you have questions or concerns, as they are movement specialists. The final base physical aspect I'll discuss is substances. While it's natural to want to distract, numb, and avoid right now, as I've said, this is so distressing for us, and we hate feeling distress. Using substances to cope with this adds risk. Many articles I've read suggest that smoking and vaping greatly increase our risk to the respiratory consequences of COVID-19. We need to be strengthening our lungs to withstand this virus if we get it. Additionally, we're all well familiar, well, at least I am, with how it feels to wake up the morning after drinking too much alcohol. During these times, our bodies are depleted and using energy to recover, which has impacts on mood, energy, and overall well-being and emotional vulnerability. We've probably all experienced that hangover irritability at some point. Either way, substance use makes us more vulnerable to mental and physical health consequences. And while it is a part of our society and it's natural to use substances to avoid distress, it also may leave us more emotionally and physically vulnerable at a time we're already under so much stress. Eastern Health and our Employee Family Assistance Program provide services for people who have concerns about the amount of substances they are using to cope. And there are also many online and telephone resources, such as the Smokers Helpline and Bridge the Gap. If you have concerns that substance use or misuse is impacting on your health or that of a loved one, I would highly recommend Eastern Health's addiction services. And Doorways has several skilled addictions counselors on staff as well. All of this can take time. So for the sake of this webinar, I'll suggest that we look briefly at some of the different approaches that we use. And if you're interested in learning more, you can speak with the EFAP or complete one of the many online modules through a fantastic website called Center for Clinical Interventions. And they have many workbooks from some strategies I'll be introducing you to, including cognitive behavioral therapy and acceptance and commitment therapy. You might have noticed that resources is on the second level of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and they are one of our safety needs. So here are some ideas for psychology and mental health-based resources that can be helpful during this time. You can certainly take a photo of this or a screenshot. Bridge the Gap, our provincial mental health and addictions website, has modules through TAO Self-Help, which is therapy assisted online. And you can also connect with the Employee Family Assistance Program or Eastern Health Mental Health and Addiction Services or private practitioners to learn more about these different strategies and how to apply them to yourself. I also included the ACT Companion app on this, which is currently a free resource. I highly recommend it. It is the only app I have ever paid for. There's a lot of free resources online right now, and so I just included this Care for Your Coronavirus and Anxiety Toolkit. I know that the Association of Psychology Newfoundland Labrador and the Canadian Psychological Association also have resources, and Bridge the Gap website has some resources as well specific to coping with coronavirus. There might be additional resources you need to coordinate that I don't have listed here. These are primarily for mental health, but I do know that there are lots of resources available now, such as employment insurance, mortgage deferments, student loan deferments, child care options. So make sure to reach out and talk to others about what resources are available in your community to help with whatever resource needs you have. Okay, so those are some physical and resource ways to address this. Now let's move on to our minds, because I'm sure all of our minds have been chattering away at us throughout this webinar. Before we do, I'd like everyone to stand for a moment. Reach your arms into the sky, stretching, and trying to stretch your body out as if it was elastic. Now take 2 or 3 deep breaths, focusing on your breath as it travels down your airways, into your lungs, and back out through your mouth or your nose. Notice the difference in temperature between the air as it enters your body and as it exits. Okay, our mind. So again, it's natural for our mind to worry. Remember, on level 2 of the pyramid are security concerns: body, employment, resources, morality, family, health, property. So our mind wants to remind us of these threats. What if you get sick? What if a family member gets sick? What if you're not teaching your kids as well as the teachers do and they fail 5th grade? What if you run out of groceries or toilet paper? What if you can't pay your rent or your mortgage and get evicted and are homeless during COVID? It's our mind's job to alert us to these threats. And yet it's exhausting and distressing to be constantly bombarded by these messages. Psychologists tend to use many tools to help people learn how to engage differently with their mind, learn how to understand the intention of these thoughts, allow them to be present without impacting their behaviors, and also examine them critically to decide if they're based in evidence, emotion, or some combination. We also examine whether we've fallen into common thinking traps and whether there's value or benefit to listening to the thought. So one of the typical thinking errors or cognitive distortions that we all experience is catastrophic thinking. There are several components to this thinking style, including overestimating the likelihood that a disastrous event will occur, like the worst case scenario, while also underestimating our ability to cope with or manage this disastrous event. This could be more global: we're all going to die from this virus, or personal: I will get sick and will be unable to afford my rent. While this thinking style is natural, again, the mind's function is to alert us to potential threats, whether actual or perceived. The challenge is that our system cannot differentiate between actual and perceived threat. So when our mind is telling us we'll definitely get sick, and if we do, we will die, if we buy into this belief and really believe it, our bodies will think it's definitely true. Whereas if we can treat it as it is, by examining the evidence that disputes my mind's fears, my body won't respond from that threat, and my stress response system won't be as engaged. And then I can continue to do whatever I was doing before my mind set off the alarm system, which again is its job. So here are some examples of my rational disputes. Not everyone who comes into contact with the virus becomes symptomatic. The vast majority of those who are symptomatic do not require medical intervention. There are practices I can engage in to decrease my risk of getting the virus. My landlord is understanding and will likely work with me on this. Or my bank is offering mortgage deferrals. None of those statements are extra optimistic. For example, I'm not saying I definitely won't get this virus. The thing is, our mind also has a BS detector, and rational thinking is not like putting on rose-colored glasses. It's more like taking off our sunglasses, which are too dark for indoor lighting, and putting on our clear our clear glasses. This is how therapists use the cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, approach to help people manage the extreme thoughts we all naturally have. So how do we use acceptance and commitment therapy to navigate the mind and thoughts, you ask? Oh, you didn't ask? Well, let me share that anyhow, as it fits really nicely into that dialectic I brought to your attention earlier. Remember the balance between acceptance and change? Well, ACT is excellent for helping us with the accept part so we can free ourselves from the struggle and move toward change. There are many strategies for engaging differently with our mind and thoughts. We call these strategies diffusion strategies. They're called this because we tend to get so caught up in our thoughts so easily that it becomes difficult to even see the separation between us and what our mind is telling us. Hence, we are fused with our thoughts. When we can defuse, when we're able to see our thoughts for what they are, which then allows us to make choices, we no longer are blindly accepting them as truth. So, do we blindly follow the mind's orders? Or do we try and examine the evidence? Or do we thank it for its information and make a choice that the thought isn't helpful right now? Do we temporarily tune in to see if it is important and then tune back into what we're doing in the moment while radio doom and gloom keeps playing on in the background? There are so many strategies and ways to engage. I'll teach you one right now. Say out loud, if possible, one of the thoughts you've had about coronavirus. Maybe it's something like, life will never be the same again. Really buy into this thought. Believe it's completely true. Reflect on all of the aspects of life that will never be the same again. Notice how that feels in your body. Do you have a heaviness, a lump in your throat, a pit in your stomach? Are you sad? Do you have a sense of dread? Do you feel really tired? Let's try something different. Say, I'm having the thought, life will never be the same again. And say that again, out loud if possible. I'm having the thought, life will never be the same again. It's a thought. It may be true, it may be untrue. We haven't evaluated the evidence, and we don't have access to the future. What we do know is it is a thought created by our mind with the intention of trying to keep us safe, and with the effect, if we really buy into it, of leading us to feel heavy, sad, or tired. And with the effect, if we can diffuse, of seeing it for what it is, just a thought. Words created by our brain, trying to help us. Like an unhelpful family member or friend. Another form of therapy, positive psychology, explores mindsets amongst other things. We discuss in positive psychology the fixed mindset or the growth mindset. During this crisis, it will be important to consider your mindset and be willing to shift it into a more growth or resilient-based mindset, as this will benefit your mental health. Now, not all of these mindset shift statements will apply or be true for each of you, so I hope you can use this as a template to consider how to shift your own mindset in coming weeks. For example, I'm stuck at home can be shifted to, I get to be safe in my home and spend time with my family. Now, that obviously is not true for everyone. Unfortunately, some of us don't have safety in our homes, and some of us live alone and are quite isolated right now from our family. So choose mindset shifts that fit for you. We're doing so much work here today. I'm going to get you to do another exercise with me right now that you can return to in the future. It's another positive psychology exercise, or what's called a positive psychology intervention, or PPI. So the top one there, the top daily quarantine question, what am I grateful for today? Gratitude is a major component of positive psychology. For some of you, answering that question will feel easy, and for others, it'll be more challenging. Don't make it too big. We always say to our clients, think small. It can be something you ate, a moment you shared with your children, whether human or furry, a funny meme that made you laugh, or even the opportunity to attend this webinar. It can also be something big, like connection with a higher power, an aspect of nature, or even life itself. What research has demonstrated is that engaging in a regular gratitude practice, our brains change and we notice more to feel grateful about. Our minds are threat detectors, and we can train them to be gratuity detectors as well. One of my favorite videos, Happiness 101 by Tal Ben-Shahar, which is on YouTube, and I encourage you to check it out, gives a dual definition of appreciation. Appreciation means recognition and enjoyment of the good qualities of someone or something. And it also means increase in monetary value. So basically, that which we recognize and enjoy as good will increase in value. As we train our minds, we will more naturally see the good, and at first we will need to work at it, especially given the seriousness of the world situation right now. So gratuity is an activity that helps with our emotions, as do some of the other strategies that I'm about to mention. Now, because psychologists love being repetitive, well, okay, maybe we don't love it. We know, though, repetition is an important tool for learning. I'm going to repeat the two main points so far once again: self-compassion and the dialectic of acceptance and change. These are important for grounding our conversation about how to navigate our emotions during this challenging time. On the one hand, there are a lot of reasons we're experiencing the emotions we are, whether they're fear, dread, sadness, anger, or any other emotion that's arising for you right now. It's also natural to have happiness right now, even if it leads to guilt with awareness of how many people are suffering. We are human, and we're giving ourselves permission to be human, including opening up to the natural emotions that are arising within us in this moment. These are aspects of self-compassion and acceptance. We want to self-validate. And what do we want to validate? We want to validate the many losses of normalcy that we're experiencing daily and many times each day. Whether it was being able to prepare for a wedding, enjoy your pregnancy, go on that vacation you were saving for and planning, socialize with friends as usual, work in the way you have throughout your career. Whether this is disrupting a major life milestone or your typical routine, we're all experiencing so many losses right now, and this situation deviates entirely from what we consider normal. We want to validate that for ourselves amongst other natural aspects of this experience. So here's the essence of self-validation. Letting go of judgments of ourselves, because that typically leads to shame. Noticing shame, and if you really haven't gone against your values, letting it go, allowing another emotion, whatever is primary, describing what's happening, acknowledging your wants, your needs, and practicing being, noticing, describing. And again, coming back to that compassion you could turn to someone else and trying to apply it to yourself. What would you say to someone you care about when they were in this situation? So that is the side of acceptance. Now, what if what we want to do is try to change our emotions? Once we've acknowledged them and accepted them, I see you, I know you're valid, we can move toward change. So the gratitude activity is one strategy for change. Humor is another. And what Newfoundlander and what healthcare professional hasn't used humor to cope at some point, especially dark humor? So these are some of my favorites from the past week. I love that dog that's usually in a house full of fire, saying this is fine, drinking his cup of coffee. And now on point, he's moved to being in a house full of toilet paper. The top right one, sometimes I wonder if all of this is happening because I didn't forward that message to 10 other people. And of course, the bottom left one, how I expected my apocalypse outfit to look and what it is. These two are personal to me. I'm a huge Deadhead, and for those of you who don't know, Grateful Dead songs tend to be really long. So the image on the left is when the CDC recommends washing your hands to the length of a song, but you only listen to the Grateful Dead. You get pretty pruny. And as a proud Jewish woman, I especially loved the irony of Passover being canceled because of a plague. As I said, laughing through hard times is how I've gotten through my life, and I think many of us feel the same. It's also important to connect with what's valuable and meaningful to us right now, but likely in a different way. So we discussed some ways to connect with humor, and now we can look at some of the other values. So for example, if spirituality and religion is important to you, maybe you do an online Bible study or attend an online church service. Maybe now is the time to read that book you've had for a while or engage in a meditative or yoga practice. Maybe being helpful is important to you. There's lots of crisis lines and helplines looking for volunteers right now. People are teaching online courses, so maybe you could teach and if you have a knowledge area. If you're healthy, offer to get groceries or shovel or mow the lawn, see I'm being hopeful, for a neighbor who's vulnerable. Call a senior or someone you know lives alone for a conversation. Write a letter to someone residing in long-term care or a senior's home. If creating is your value, take on a craft. Use this time to learn a new creative skill, such as cooking or baking. Take an online class. Lots of them are currently offered. Learn to play a new instrument or create a daily practice for an instrument you already play. Write a song or a poem or a short story or start a novel. I know I saw that there's a Newfoundland kitchen party happening on Facebook where people are posting videos of themselves singing or doing some kind of arts. And it's beautiful to see people being so vulnerable and putting themselves out there. A lot of talented folk here in Newfoundland. Rock painting is also really popular right now, and it can also lead to a walk to hide the rock or gardening to place the rock. And again, there's a wonderful Facebook group, Newfoundland Rock Art, that I'm blown away by the talent in this province. If you love learning, You can read, you can learn a new language, you can take an online course. Many of the Ivy League courses are free right now, and there's even like a course on well-being right now that sounds fantastic. They're all free. You can learn mindfulness. You can engage in a daily practice or the 30-day mindfulness challenge on the Bridge the Gap website. If you love nature, you can work in your yard, start a garden, watch the different animal feeds. The penguins are super cute. And the other day I watched a sloth for like 20 minutes during lunch. Go for a mindful nature walk. Many trails are still accessible. If your values are around family, spend time with those in your home in person and create space for connection virtually. As someone who lives away from my family, I'm an American and my whole family lives in the US. I've had to be creative with technology since I moved to Newfoundland. Not only do I regularly speak on the phone with my parents and my grandmother, I regularly text with friends and family from all different parts of my life, FaceTime with my young nieces and nephews. I've attended their birthday parties, I've attended memorial services, definitely had a few Christmas morning gift openings and a few Hanukkahs with my nieces and nephews. And in fact, I've never even met my youngest niece and nephew in person, and they still know me and regularly ask to see me. So while we might need to be creative in how we engage with our values, it's essential to continue in some form. For example, I'm texting several friends daily because I'm social, and preparing and delivering this webinar and continuing to see my clients because I'm helpful. I'm hula hooping, cooking, baking, and listening to music most days as I value movement, music, and creativity. And I just joined a Facebook book club as I love learning, reading, and connecting with others. I'm doing most of these things in different ways than I was a few weeks ago. And while I'm sad that I'm not able to do what I did then, like socialize in person, get a book from the library or peruse chapters, see my clients face to face, hoop with friends in person, go to the store and get what I need to prepare an elaborate meal that day, I am finding ways to creatively engage in my values, knowing that it will help. Acceptance and change. So this isn't an exhaustive list of values. One of the sites that I really like is Values in Action, or VIA, which has a free version of a character strength survey that helps you identify your values. And there's also lots of values clarification activities available online. So now we're veering into the territory of behaviors. And as you can see, all of these different aspects of our experience interact with each other. So our values drive our behaviors, which impact our emotions. Our thoughts can impact our behaviors and emotions. And if we make changes with any area, thoughts as an example, it will impact our emotions and our behaviors. If we treat our physical needs, like if we exercise, it will help us think more clearly or be more emotionally regulated and have energy to engage in more helpful behaviors. So to touch on some ways to focus specifically on behaviors as related to COVID, one thing you might have noticed is a continual pull to surfing the web, trolling Facebook, perusing the news, watching coronavirus-related videos on YouTube, talking to friends and family about COVID, and otherwise focusing too much of your time and energy on the coronavirus. I'm sure you've already noticed that while it's natural, as we're trying to better understand and then control the situation to provide us some safety, it's also likely unhelpful. While we do need to stay informed, it's important to limit the amount of information we take in right now. Choose a few sources that are important, such as one source of local and one source of national news. While it may be tempting to expose ourselves to what's happening worldwide, it's overwhelming enough to focus on what's happening in our community. So try to limit your exposure to what feels safe and right for you. Also, try to limit the time you spend with the news. For example, choose one time early in the day and one later in the day, but not right before bed, to update yourself using the sites you've predetermined. And if you need to, set a timer. There's a diagram here we call the choice point. And it's one thing that's really interesting to notice about behaviors is that we have two different aspects of experience happening. On the one hand, we have an action urge or tendency, and that's the pull that we feel toward doing something, whether it's getting yet another of our quarantine snacks from the cupboard or staying on the couch or checking Facebook. And we call those away moves. We can experience that action urge, the urges toward those away moves, without acting on that behavior. And we may not always be aware of that space or the choice point between the urge and the behavior. However, if we use mindfulness, we can begin to observe it. So we can have an urge to stay on the couch and make a choice to move towards, which might look like getting up and walking for 30 minutes. We can have an urge to check Facebook and make a choice to have a conversation with a friend via Skype. We have space to make a choice, and we use mindfulness to create more awareness of and more power within that space to make behavioral choices that align with our needs and our values, rather than our urges and habits. Another important behavior choice right now is to respect others' boundaries about how much and in what way to discuss the virus. Some people may be very overwhelmed and need to contain their virus thoughts to specific times, and maybe not at all during work. So before you discuss anything virus related, ask permission. Also, please know that we are all individuals. So the way that I'm thinking about, feeling about, experiencing generally, or coping with in any way may look really different from the way that yours does. That does not mean that one of us is doing this the right way, because there's no one right way. We all need to find our own paths based on our unique needs, values, and experiences within this common experience. So what are some other behavior ideas? Here's some fun ones I found on Facebook and online. These are all different activities you can choose to engage in instead of staring at the COVID dashboard or reading news stories, trolling Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram, or consuming yourself with the pandemic. So these are just a few ideas, and the point is that you can choose your behaviors during this time and use this as a time to learn a new skill or engage in a new hobby, have some fun, play with your children or by yourself, or deepen your mastery within an existing skill. One of my clients just told me about someone on Instagram that she's following to better manage her money, which is her goal for this period. So Lego every day is having a challenge on Facebook on the Lego page. And then I also found this group, and these challenges seem a little bit more intense. So maybe they're more for the people who, as they say, are more Lego masters. There's also these yoga challenges, and there's different classes, yoga classes you could take. Again, some of them in groups via Zoom, some of them individually. I love these neighborhood bingos and the different scavenger hunts that people are posting on Facebook. And some of the scavenger hunts are within your own home. So they'll have like book scavenger hunts, like find these different things in a book, or they'll have kitchen scavenger hunts, find these different items in the kitchen. And so it's really fun to kind of play around with different options for yourself and your kids. For those of you who love music like I do, I've been so delighted by all of the different concerts available online during this time. So there's Metallica Mondays. I'm, as I mentioned, a Deadhead, and so I was really grateful to take in a show that we saw live last summer in Chicago on Saturday night past. Nugs.tv is only one of the people who's streaming these shows for free, but there's lots of different options. And of course, a lot of them are looking for donations for different causes. I know Alan Doyle's been doing something every day as well for, I think it's for the Children's Helpline. And Shani Gannett did a really fun St. Patty's Day show for the Community Food Sharing Network. So there's all kinds of options. If you're a Broadway fan or you're somebody who's into the opera or ballet, I know that Broadway HD is offering a 7-day free trial. PBS is also opening up a lot of their programming with operas and ballets and symphony. If you'd like animals, there's zoos that are streaming. And I know the other day, as I mentioned, I was able to watch a sloth during my lunch, which was really entertaining and pretty different from my typical lunch companions at work. I have to put a plug in. One of the things that I do in my personal life is I'm on the board of directors for Ignite Circus, which is a social circus in Newfoundland. And it's run by my friend Danielle. And she's been doing these Facebook Live events throughout the quarantine. Each week she does something different. So you'll see that last week she taught people how to make a hula hoop and then use it. A couple of weeks ago, she taught people how to make juggling balls and juggle. And she's got the flower sticks workshop coming up. So those are also known as devil sticks. But this could be a great opportunity to support somebody locally who's doing some really good things for people in our community. Another great way to support local people is through some of the online classes. I was delighted to see that Orthai has a CBC appearance. I think it's today. And she's been doing online classes, Facebook Live classes, cooking delicious Thai meals. So if that's something you're interested in, that could be a great thing to participate in. So we've covered a lot of ground today, and I love this image because, you know, Waldo has found himself. I hope that all the information that's contained in this webinar is going to help you navigate during these uncertain, stressful, and constantly changing times. And while you may not transcend as Waldo did, I really hope that you're able to cope as well as you can and navigate this time as skillfully as possible. I really appreciate your time today. I hope that you can go back and review the parts of the webinar that are helpful to you. And thank you very much for your attention.